So welcome everyone to 30 Years and 30 Days, some Pilates history with Sean Gallagher. I'm Cathy Strack, and I will be interviewing Sean tonight regarding synergy and the development of the training program. So the other thing is we have been asked to explain who Wee Tai is. And very briefly, he was one of the owners of the Pilates studio, right? So it was
The
Joe.
fourth owner.
Okay, it was Joe and Clara, then Romana with the investors, then Larry Stanton, who
Isotoner.
his company was Isotoner, and later Sarah Lee, and then Wee Tai. So Wee Tai was actually from California, and he was a surfer and kind of became this entrepreneur businessman, and he moved to New York City, and he started Pilates because he thought it would help him with surfing. And so that's kind of his background story, and then became owner, and then sold the business to you.
Yep.
So that brings us up to what year now are we, as we start to talk about what synergy was?
Well. So I opened the office. Steve and I opened the space in 1990.
Steve
And
who?
Giordano, Stevie
Okay.
G. Okay.
Okay.
And what happened was, I went to New York. I was going part time, and Lori Coleman had an apartment with a roommate on 73rd, and her
Okay.
roommate was moving out for a period of time. It was like 9 months or a year or something like that.
Okay.
And this was like in the spring, so for the summer, right? So I moved in, and then she got accepted into PT school, so she went back down to Philadelphia. So
Okay.
back and forth to
Kind
go
of
to
swap.
PT school. Well, and then she came back again and was a student of mine for PT as well at the studio.
Okay.
So we had a lot of good connections.
Yeah.
Um, so that I had was in the apartment, and that was on 73rd, and I wanted to work with dancers. So I was like, well, Steps is around it was on 74th and Broadway. So I was like, well, I should go over and see if they have space. So I went, and I talked to Carol, who is the owner of Steps, blanking on her last name. But
So Steps was a physical therapy
no,
facility?
no, it was a dance. It's a dance school. It was the whole floor
Oh.
of dance. A whole floor of a building. It was all dance studios.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And she said, "Well, I don't have any space, but the woman downstairs, Rita Colby Ballet, was closing." So I
Okay.
went and talked with her, and she said she was leaving, and it was a empty room that was a ballet studio. And I
Hmm.
talked to the landlord, and they said yes. And I asked Steve if he wanted to do it with me.
How did you know Steve in the first
Well,
place?
I found Steve through Lori Coleman. I talked about this
Okay.
in a previous one. Basically,
Okay.
I dated Lori when she was at Temple, and she was like, "You got to work out. You can work out with Steve. There's a full studio here." Because I had taken
Hmm.
one session and that was it. And then
Hmm.
I started going regularly to work out with Steve. So he'd been my teacher.
Okay.
So that's what we did. And in the beginning it was really great. We had both a lot of energy, and wanted to do stuff with
Yeah.
the work and everything else.
Two
And I
young
was still
guys.
trying,
Yep.
yeah, and I was still trying to do my PT and do everything together. So it was good.
Okay.
So that was 1990, and when we moved in, I had about a little bit more than a third of the space, and he had
Okay.
and he had two-thirds. And we did most of the work. Like we built all the different stuff, or had somebody build it, and we did a lot of the work to get that space going. We put mirrors in everywhere. And it was a
Uh-huh.
1,000 square feet. It was just like a straight, second floor. There was windows,
And
but they
so,
looked onto a brick wall.
okay, that's New York.
Yeah.
So what did you offer there? And the business was called Synergy.
Well, no, in the beginning, I
Uh-huh.
had performing arts physical therapy, and he had
Okay.
the New York Institute of Movement Science. That was
Oh.
his business, and I had mine. And so he was doing his Pilates work, and I was doing the physical therapy, and I would refer my patients if they needed, when they were done. It's like, it's right here. This is, you need to exercise. This is a great form. And then we started talking, and we wanted to develop, the training, a program for teaching. Because by
Mm-hmm.
this time, Wee Tai, this was 90, so Wee Tai had been out of business for almost 2.5 years. Wasn't
Right.
doing any training. Romana wasn't really doing any training, and she was interested in doing it. So, Steve talked to Romana and said, we have a studio. We have, with the equipment, if you want to come up and start doing workshops, you can, and she agreed. And so she started coming and doing workshops. And then,
Okay.
we wanted to talk about doing a training program, and to get teachers trained. Because that's,
Okay.
if you have a studio, and you're starting to get busy, what happens? You need, you have more and more people coming. You want to, have people to be able to do that with.
So you needed teachers.
Yeah, everybody. At most studio, I mean, if you're a successful studio, what do you need? You usually need teachers.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. But I also, wanted to, it was like if Weetai wasn't going to do anything, I mean, not, Joan Breitbart was like, I'll wait till it, the mark ends. And, that's what everybody was waiting for that mark to, for him to go out of business and the mark to end. But
Okay.
then, once I started, I and got to know Ramon a little bit better. She was like, well, you should talk to Weetai. So I did. And,
Mhm.
and then we negotiated, and then I bought, that's when I bought
Right.
the name in 92. But I mean, basically, what we did is we started, putting the training program together. We would meet, and talk about it. And, and he had set up, and he did it a different way. He had different levels. And
Oh,
that's what he took to Boulder, and
okay.
he became partners with Amy and Rachel at Boulder. So he was in New York and Boulder, and and I was okay with that. I mean, we had a contract and an agreement, and and said he could do certain things, and back and forth in his business. That
Okay.
was, and if that's what he was doing, that was fine, because
So you kind of
he
saw
would.
at that point that you needed some organization and an
Well, I was,
agreement as to,
I always wanted organization. I wanted to know what was
yeah.
going on, and I try to have a lot of people give me a hard time because I want a contract. Well,
Yeah.
contract, and I get, shaking hands and saying, that's it. But in today's
Hmm.
world, in Pilates world, especially now, more and more now than ever, because, people don't always
Yeah.
do what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that and other things as well.
Well, contracts protect people. So
Well,
Elaine is asking for clarification. So Synergy was a combination of your two
no, it
businesses
was,
or a third?
we were making it a separate business that we were working, we were going to make Synergy exercise system, and that was something we were going to do together. I still had my physical therapy practice. He still had his Pilates practice, and then the Synergy was going to be, the training program, and
Yeah.
doing the certification and the training. And I was going to be teaching, the science part of that, and anatomy and all the other stuff that would be involved. And then
Okay.
Romana would be teaching the Pilates, and then he would be the supervising teacher that, when they're doing their apprenticeship and things like that. That's how
Okay.
it's, and that's how it started. And so, when we, so that when we would do these workshops and the trainings,
Hmm.
right? I mean, I had a third of the space, and he had two-thirds, and there was no wall. And,
Hmm.
so it was, when he would do it, I would turn on the camera. One of the students would, we'd move it around. It was like we'd set up the camera, and then they would go, and I would
Okay.
be there I would be there a lot of the time.
So you've got this synergy going. You're
Hmm.
doing the trainings.
Yeah.
How long does that time period last for where
Plugging it up in there.
things are kind of gelling and meshing and
Well, for about a
okay?
year, things went really well for a year.
Okay.
We worked together. We were doing all these things. We were putting things together, setting up the process, and figuring out, what worked, what didn't, that type of thing, and
Okay.
organizing the training aspect of how to put it all together. And along with Romana, it wasn't just Steve
Yeah.
and me, it was Romana there too. And she had
Yeah.
a lot of input. And again, it was workshops and training. And we had lots
Okay.
of people come. And well, lots. I mean, maybe, probably around somewhere around 10 each time, 7 to
Okay.
10, people in the beginning. It wasn't that well known. So, and again, a
Yeah.
lot of it was dancers,
Right. So what was
and
the basis of all that? How did put all that together based on what information?
well, that information was, there was no manual yet. That was just,
Right.
working with Romana and working with
Okay.
her, and she had started it before with Weetie. So, and it wasn't like brand new. It just didn't like pop up. It was a slow progression. So it started with Wee Tai. Wee Tai had done a training when he owned it, which was basic, basic system. Like the Taylor sisters and Moira Stott and a bunch of those people. I had their copies of their certificates, and it was a basic training with the intention of doing the intermediate and advanced later on, and he just never got there. And
Mm-hmm.
so all it was the reformer and the mat, and that was it. That's what
Oh, okay.
that was what the training was. And
Okay.
then when we started with Synergy, Steve was because Steve was going to make the equipment, and then we were
Uh-huh.
going to do the training. Our business was the training business. That was Synergy, and then he was the New York Movement Science. That was him making equipment because he was making equipment up at SUNY Purchase. They have a shop there, and they do all this stuff. So he had
Yeah.
connections, and he was making equipment that way.
Okay.
So that's something, that's sort of how that got to, sorted together. And it was the beginnings. I mean, we took it a lot farther,
Right.
later on. One of the things, if you look at the Synergy, the flyer that was posted, you'll see that it says Boulder and New York, so, Romana we were trying to set
Yeah.
up something that was going together. And then when I bought the trademark, I called Amy and Rachel, Amy, I don't know if I talked to Amy and Rachel or just Amy, I'm not sure. And I said, I own the trademark. If you guys, you want to work something out, let's do it. And they decided not to. So then Romana didn't go
Okay.
anymore.
Okay. So it was a little kind of a road bump, but you refocused on what you were doing in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
And
so it was Romana teaching and Steve, right? It was mostly
well, no,
Romana teaching.
it was Romana.
Okay.
It wasn't anybody else.
Okay.
She did the training, and then he would do the supervision.
Okay. So the training occurred all at this one location, or was
Yep.
it at other places?
It was mostly there because, at the time that she had started Dragos, but Dragos hadn't really got going like it is now, how it got. And she was in
Yeah.
body art. She was in a lot of places. So she would finish her day
Right.
of teaching and then
Mm-hmm.
come over to us at 74th and Broadway and then do the trainings there. And so
Okay.
that's, and, she would use Steve a lot as the demo model in the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mary Romana went to Boulder once. She did she did one series there and then that was it, so.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about where the 600 hours comes from?
Well, that all came that's part of the process is that you had to do an apprenticeship because before this, right? Before
Hmm.
this, the only way to become a teacher was through apprenticeship. That's how it worked. You were an apprentice. You went to the studio, you worked and you taught and you trained, and then when Ramada felt you were ready, she'd go, okay, now you go work with so and so, and or I'm going out, and then later on she'd go out of town and be like, okay, you're going to take care of my clients for me when I'm gone, and then we'll see how you do. It was a trial by error and test and things like that. But it wasn't somebody who just walked in off the floor, off the street, and she threw them in to see them. They'd been
Yeah.
students for a while, and then she would slowly do that. So that's how it was originally done in the studio. But to be able to go to Boulder and other places, we had to come up with a way to sort of meld the two together, right? Still have a training process, which is what the
Consistency. To have a
right,
consistent program. Yeah. Okay.
right, and then what would happen is, so you had to do that. And when we first started, you didn't have to have any prerequisites, but that didn't last long. Every year that kept going up because we found that, people come in and, we're not there to teach you Pilates. We wanted to be there to teach you how to teach Pilates. And
Right.
if you've never, people are like, oh, I didn't want to do this. And then they would, or they would do it and they get
Yeah.
halfway through and drop out because they realized it wasn't something that they really liked or wanted to do because they just heard it was good. And they wanted to try it. And in the
Yeah.
beginning, we didn't know, so we did. But then that changed. It got up to 70 hours before you were tested out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. I
then
had to do
and then
75 hours.
right,
Yeah.
and then the whole process of the 200, the 400, and the 600-hour test that
Yeah.
came that
Yeah. I
came
want to
about.
especially thank you for that.
Well, yeah, but it is what it is. I mean, and that whole testing process is a way, it's twofold, right? Because you get tested practically, but you also get tested, mentally, right? You have to
Right.
memorize, right? It's, you get a, here's a client, here's a list of their issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I want you to do a, basic workout with
Mm-hmm.
modifications for that particular person's issues. And you
Yeah.
have to write that all out and tell me why you left it out, what you modified, the springs, so you have to know, I have to know that you know it. Now, you could forget it in a year, and there's nothing I can do once you get certified. But that's why we had, the continuing education,
Yep.
and that's also
Like
when I
you do
start.
in many professions.
Right.
Yep.
Well, what I did is I looked at, I was a fellow Christ practitioner. I got just, licensed as a fellow Christ practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
and which was trademarked and everything else. And they had a standards of practice code of ethics. Physical therapy did. I was an athletic trainer. Athletic training did. So I used and looked at other professions that I was already in that were health related, and said,
Right.
okay, well, how do I make this something for Pilates to make it a professional program? And that was the Pilates. That's where the Pilates Guild came about.
Did you
So
talk to Romana about that? Did you explain that to her, that model that you wanted to develop?
yeah, we talked about all that stuff, and she was
Okay.
fine with that. She was like, this is, I was saying I want to make it professional. So what it ended up being was that you would get certified,
Uh-huh.
and then if you could then join the Pilates Guild, and as a member of the guild, you got to use the trademarks. Otherwise you didn't get to use the trademarks. You could get
Right.
certified, but you couldn't use the trademarks.
Right.
And the guild, there was a standards of practice and a code of ethics. And if and there was a process. If something, somebody wasn't doing something right, you would get brought up and we would look at it, and you could
Mm-hmm.
lose your ability to do that. And you also had to do continuing education, one workshop a year to make sure that, you're up to date and doing stuff. And a
Yeah.
lot of times Ramana would do, some of the left out apparatus or the super advanced stuff that was left for continuing education. And
Right.
sometimes, and she would also do usually a review, everybody just review because, you haven't done this in 2 years, and let's go through it again and make sure you're clear.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was funny. Romano were always like, oh, your study was so and so, because that person would be doing something differently.
Right.
And they'd
You
come and
could.
work out,
Yeah.
and she'd say, like, oh, you're working, oh, I see, you're working, So she would be able to usually catch that because they were
Yeah.
changing the process. I mean, you
Right.
know, far enough away that it was really not, wasn't really what Joe taught or what she was teaching anymore.
Yeah. You're getting quite a few comments of people thanking you for developing the training program and that it's really timeless.
Well, I
I,
mean,
I think they're being serious.
listen, well, I hope,
Yeah.
listen, most
Yeah.
programs are based on what? If they have prerequisites,
Yeah.
they have 200,
The
400,
testing.
600, if they have the
Yep.
testing,
The apprentice hours.
who did
Yep.
that didn't, where did that come from? That came from Ramona, Steve, and I.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Really the
then
foundation.
once I got the trademark and I started opening up training centers. I had 8 training centers around the country. Well,
Uh-huh.
every year, and we'll talk about that every year, when we get to the training, we would meet and do stuff. So,
Yeah. Well,
and what Carol's saying is Romana was also good about picking out who worked with whom, which was true. She was very good at,
yeah.
she understood people, and she understood the system and the method, and people's bodies, so that she could, how, like, you should work with
And
this
what they
person. You should,
needed.
right,
Yeah.
and make it all work. So it was really good.
Yeah.
Well, when we talk to Carol on Sunday, we can talk all
Mm-hmm.
about that, Carol. On the Synergy brochure, who chose those required books? Well, that was both of us, Steve and I. It wasn't really Romana. That was Steve and
Okay.
I. The reading list, that was, because I know there's the art of archery or something. That was one of Steve's. The
Okay.
anatomy, color. Those are the things that I was interested in. So we put that together because we felt, those are books that I thought would be helpful for somebody wanting to become, that. And Steve, I mean, if it's
Yeah.
body, mind, and spirit, the art of archery and that kind of stuff is philosophical. So there was that aspect of it as well.
Elaine
There you
says,
go.
what is Sing teaching? It's on the brochure.
That is, you'll have to, you have some research to do. You have to look that one
Ooh,
up.
go for it, Elaine. It's all yours.
It's basically, when you teach, you're not, when you speak, you can be very monotone. You can be
Hmm.
very dry. You can be, a lot of things. So
Right.
part of teaching is, part of that was also to make sure that you have, how are you expressing yourself when you're teaching? Are you singing while you teach?
Hmm.
Can you sing?
Okay.
And it's
Interesting.
using your voice. It's how to use your voice well and do that type of thing. So, but, it's a book that would, I think, it's there. You should, if you read it, you won't be sorry. Let's put it that way. If you're a teacher, I would think.
Okay, good to know. Well, when I went through one of my trainings, my teacher sent me for voice lessons. Yeah, she just
Hmm.
didn't care for the tone or something about my voice, and I went for a series of lessons. It was
Hmm.
really interesting. It was really hard.
Oh
It was
yeah.
really, really hard. And they were just half-hour lessons, and it was exhausting.
Well,
Yeah.
the reality is when you really look at Joe, and he taught you how to breathe, showed you
Hmm.
how to do it, and it's in every exercise. And a lot
Yeah.
of people forget that. They got so concerned about that. And I get, getting the movement pattern first, but you got to put that breath in there sooner than later. I mean,
Yeah.
every exercise in Return to Life has a breathing aspect. Now, 32 of the 34 are slow. So that's the other
Hmm.
thing. It's not so slow as Romana said. It's not slow like California. You got to work out, and you got to breathe, but it wasn't like super fast. Like some of the people now.
Right.
And she would do that sometimes. You have a big group, and she'd get people, and she'd make them go fast and do all that stuff. For the
Yeah.
showman, the showmanship of the or the showwomanship of the process. But
Yeah.
at the same time, she was, it's not about super fast. It's you got to put that breathing in there. And especially now, right, with COVID,
Yes.
we've skewed so far to the verbal aspect of teaching that it's even more
Hmm.
important than ever. I mean,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be bad for every Pilates teacher to take a singing lesson or two or three or
Hmm.
10 or 20.
Or at least read the book.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Oh,
So,
okay. So, yeah, just for clarification, Wee Tai is still out there somewhere and Steve is still out there somewhere.
oh yeah, they're still,
They're both
well,
alive.
the last time I saw Steve was at Romana's memorial at St. Pat's,
Okay.
and we were in the back. We sat together in the back, and
Oh,
had a nice conversation,
yep.
and talked
Yep.
about stuff. And I mean, he's like, last, he was like traveling around. He's got like a RV or something. Like Mary, you guys, I think that
Yes.
he's living.
Yeah.
He's living in the vehicle. And
Living on the road.
I think he goes to Florida in the summer, and then he comes. Last I heard, he was coming up
Yeah.
to like Rhinebeck or something in the wintertime or summertime or
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
Yeah. Okay, so then the program continued on, and obviously over the years you refined it as you saw what people
Well,
needed.
right. Well, we're going to
Um,
talk about that with
the
the
manual,
the
right?
first manual and the certification and all that stuff. There's more. There's more coming. There's a
That's
lot.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
That is the making of the first manual,
Yep.
and Elaine is going to interview you for that.
Yes. And
And
then
that
on
will be
Sunday,
tomorrow at 7.
right? And then Sunday we're going to be interviewing Carol.
Okay.
But she's going to be talking about the process of the first manual and putting it together, and we did a lot of work for that as well. We'll talk all
Yeah.
about that. So,
Yeah. Okay.
okay. All right. So I think
And
that's
that
it. Yeah.
brings us to the end of this conversation. Yeah. Thank
Yes.
you,
All right.
everyone, for your
Well,
time and
thanks for
attention.
joining, and thank you for
Yeah.
interviewing. Thanks everybody.
Okay.
So, all right. So it's all
All
coming.
right.
There's,
See you
we're
tomorrow at
we're
7.
only what 5 days in. We still got a lot more to go.
I know. There's so much information, though.
There is
I
so
mean,
much, and I mean, I'm only given, a small piece of it. So there's so
yeah.
much more,
Yeah.
it's like years of information, and I tell it to you in a half hour. There's,
Yeah.
but when we add it all up, it's going to be a nice body of work for people to have a really good understanding of what the process was.
Yep.
So
Yep.
thanks. All
All
right.
right.
Bye, everybody.
Talk to you later.
All
Bye,
right. Bye
everyone.
bye.